And welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. My name is Matt Del Vecchio. Thank you for joining me here on a rainy Sunday. You know, as we age, the importance of getting our legal papers in order become extremely important. You know, I've had several notaries on the show over the years in the past, stressing the fact that we should all have a power of attorney and something called a protection mandate. Well, to help guide us through protection mandates and the homologation process, I'd like to bring in clinical social worker Stephanie Geller, team lead for Lianas Psychosocial Assessment. Stephanie, welcome to Life Unrehearsed.
Thanks for having me.
Stephanie, thanks for joining me here in studio. Really important topic, a lot of confusion out there, and we'd like to demystify a little bit. First of all, let's define what is a protection mandate.
Yeah, that's a good question. So a lot of people have what is called a power of attorney, but that is null when somebody is deemed incapable. That is, in fact, when your protection mandate comes into place. So at the time that a person is of aptitude, they will decide who they want to make certain decisions on their behalf in the event that they become incapacitated. That's part of a protection mandate.
Very interesting. So while you're apt and capable, you're saying, hey, my mandatory is going to be so-and-so. Perhaps there's going to be a substitute if ever I become inapt.
Exactly.
And then that's called the protection mandate. Okay, so, you know, not a lot of people know this. You and I are both in this business as well. And a lot of people simply don't have protection mandates. What happens in a situation where all of a sudden now you are inapt through a stroke or Alzheimer's or dementia or what have you, and you don't have that protection mandate? What happens in Quebec?
So there's a few things that I would consider. Firstly, a lot of people don't realize that when they've actually filled out their papers, like a power of attorney or whatnot, they would put in a clause. This is something to consider because it says in the event of incapacity. So we need to also consider that. But if there is nothing in place, then we automatically have to opt in Quebec for a tutorship. And we need to apply for that. So if you don't have a protection mandate, we are going to opt for tutorship, which is a little bit of a different process, but yet again through a notary.
All right. So yes, tutorship can be a little bit more complicated, but that's why it's there. If you don't have a protection mandate, always recommended to do the protection mandate though while you can. All right. I hear all the time, well, I have a protection mandate. My mom or my dad is now considered inapt, but it's good. You know, I'm named as the mandatory and no problem. Well, in fact, there's an actual process that has to take place
That's right.
in order to enact or execute this protection mandate called homologation.
Correct.
So what is that process?
Okay. So my quick version of homologation is the word activation. So that's to say that in order to activate the protection mandate, you need to homologate the mandate. That's the word that you were using. And what that involves, of course, is a few things. One is you need a doctor to sign off on, not on any form, not on any papers, but it's a specific form that was filled out by the public curator's office, as well as a social worker who is in this field and has been studied and signed off on this in this field as well to do what's called a psychosocial assessment. And those two forms, along with other forms that come along with the notary, are what go to the court, which are needed in order to homologate a mandate.
All right, got it. So a medical assessment, an original assessment has to be filled out by a doctor. The psychosocial assessment is filled out by a social worker that specializes in this, like yourself.
Correct.
And the originals are handed to the notary. The notary also has a couple of forms to fill out. They send it to the courts. This is called the homologation process.
And we wait.
And you wait. And we're going to talk about timing in a second. Now, so obviously the medical assessment is done by a doctor.
Yes.
The psychosocial assessment, what's involved in that process?
So that's where they want to, and when I say they, I mean the courts, okay? The judge needs to understand more about the actual person that we're talking about. So the psychosocial assessment will talk about where did the person come from? What type of life did they live? What are their social needs? What are their activities of daily living? And they want to know exactly what is involved in terms of taking care of a person now.
It's a big deal. This is what a protection mandate is. If you're inapt, you're being protected in Quebec. And part of the psychosocial assessment is to make sure that the individual is protected.
Exactly.
And you're going to the courts to get a judgment to take these decision-making powers away from the individual. So
Yes,
it's a big deal. So who gets interviewed in a psychosocial assessment?
Oh, good question. Definitely the first person is the person that you're actually looking to homologate their mandate. That's the person that you need to do the main interview with. Very often we will interview or ask for close family members or people that they have named as mandataries in their protection mandate, meaning people responsible who will be helping to make decisions, or as a matter of fact, will be making decisions for them at the time when a judgment happens. There are also, you just talked about substitute mandataries. So for example, if I'm a mandatory, I might say I am the person that will be responsible. However, in the event that I cannot act on this person's behalf, a substitute mandatory will need to take over for me. And that would be people that the person that we're talking about who has the protection mandate has named at the time of their aptitude as people that they are comfortable with who could act in the event that your mandatory cannot.
Listening to Life Unrehearsed, Matt Del Vecchio here, talking with social worker Stephanie Geller about the importance of protection mandates and the homologation process. So much going on, quickly running out of time, but the interviews, there's a lot of people you just talked about. Family members have to get interviewed, the individual. Are these interviews all done in person or by phone or virtually? How does that work?
That's a good question. So we definitely invite mandataries if they live close by or they're able to come in. And if not, we would usually do either telephone, preferably Zoom calls. We'd like to see face-to-face to identify the people that we're speaking with. And part of the interview process is asking the people, in fact, do you still want to take on the rights that this person has named you as a mandatory? And they have to agree to that. And we put that in the notes.
Interesting. So, but the individual that is considered inapt that you're doing the protection mandate for, that has to be a face-to-face interview.
It has to be. Okay. It has to be.
And the others, the family members and so on, can be done either by phone or virtually or in person.
That is correct.
Right? Okay. So it has to be, and wherever they reside as well, right? You're checking out the home environment.
I want to see where they live, where they're currently living, and how they're managing in their living situation right now.
Okay. Very quickly, what types of questions do you ask in a psychosocial assessment?
Oh, tell me, general ones. Tell me about your life. Tell me how things are going for you. What keeps you busy during the day? I want to hear their answers for this. Mm-hmm. But I also want to hear a bit of their thinking process as well. So, for example, if I would say something like, if you saw a fire happen in your room, what would you do if something like that happened? And they might say, look, I would leave. Well, that's great. I wanted to hear that. But I also want to hear, what are the next steps afterwards? Then what would you do? Would you contact somebody? Would you go to the nursing station if you were in a residence and whatnot? I want to hear their thinking patterns and how they think through their processes to understand truly what their inaptitude is.
And you're also interviewing family members, so you're also getting a good idea of the family and the surroundings to make sure everyone's on board here with the
I
process.
need to confirm that I agree that the people that are named as mandataries are the people that are responsible and will take the person's best interests at heart.
Talking with clinical social worker Stephanie Geller about the homologation process for something called protection mandate. So important. All of us should have a protection mandate. Now, after you complete the assessment, what happens?
So all of the originals will go back to the notary, and the notary will claim it to the courts, okay? And that's where they get a claim number, if you will, and we wait. And this waiting process, I think you were starting to talk about before, because that's what unfortunately is the frustrating part for lots of families.
Yeah, it could really vary. And first of all, there's just gathering all the information. There's getting the medical assessment, which is usually the priority. Medical assessment comes first, followed by the psychosocial assessment, then in the hands of the notary, then they submit it to the courts. It can be 9-10 months, correct?
It could.
For this type of process. We hope to have it sooner. It's kind of out of our hands when it's in the courts, but this isn't something that happens in a matter of a week or two. The whole process here. All right. Well, Stephanie, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Such good information. If our listeners want to find out a little bit more about the homologation process, or they want to reach you, how can they reach you?
Well, listen, they can definitely call Lianas Services. That would be the first way to do it. If not, my cell phone would be fine. That's 514-919 712-7737. And even if you're not sure if you're at this stage, you can always just call me and I'll walk you through the process and let you know if this is something you need to consider at this time.
Okay, great, Stephanie. And again, you can call Stephanie. You can go on the Lianas, Lianas Services websites. You'll see Stephanie there.
Yeah.
And all the numbers are there as well. Thank you so much for coming.
So welcome. Thank you.
All right, next up, trying to get support at home for a loved one can certainly be challenging. The waiting lists are getting longer and longer through the public system. So we're going to be talking with the home care specialist about navigating home care both in the public and the private sectors. That's going to be coming up after a CTV News update.